Chapter 1. Thea. The Torn Citadel. It had been 2 days since the attack on Torvald, and the Flamma household had changed. Luckily, most of the house had been spared from direct damage, but that didn't mean any of it was safe. Bands of wild men ran in the streets, and the wild dragons that remained under the Dark Prince's control flew overhead, passing like a shadow and swooping down on anything that moved. Not as many as there were. King Justin had ordered us back to the city to help anyone we could find. We currently couldn't approach the academy. The air was so thick with the vicious wild dragons it was too dangerous to risk trying. They'd torn apart parts of the city, their claws scraping away roofs and their snouts breaking apart grain houses, inns, and homes. But the wild dragons were growing tired of destruction, and most had left. There were only so many cobblestones even a feral dragon could destroy before it had its fill. And only so many commands they would follow before their wild nature took over again and they headed back to their homelands in the wilds of the far north. I crept along the upper floor. We'd been hearing noises, and my mother had worried that someone or something had gotten in. I was quick to volunteer to investigate and ran out of the room before my mother could stop me. Pausing outside my family's sweeping staircase, I kept my hand on my sword and was relieved to see the window above was unbroken. My mother had insisted on returning to Torvald to find my father, and they both stayed so they might salvage what they could. I'd thought it was a foolish endeavor, but generations of Flammas had called this estate home, and I could understand their reluctance to abandon everything. But it wasn't safe here, and I needed to get them out of the house and gone from the city. The view looking down over the different tiers of the city was a sad one. Smoke still drifted up from several fires, and I could see the ruinous smears of crumbled buildings, bridges, and walls. No movement in the sky today. I remembered how Seb had suffered when he had tried to control the wild dragons. He'd been exhausted, too tired to even speak afterward. How much energy must it have cost Vincent to control so many wild dragons? Or was it easier for him with the darkening? A huff and a snarl from the darkened room ahead of me snapped my attention back to the present. Just what on earth was wrong with me? You would have thought I would be at least a little wary of setting foot in such an uncertain situation. I tried to slow my breaths, remembering how Seb taught me to be attuned to Kaelax's heartbeat. She wasn't here with me now, but thinking about her helped, and I flexed my hand around the hilt of my short sword, drew it without a sound, and felt its weight as I edged closer to the darkened, half-open door. What was I about to find? A wild man? A raider from the south? Or some other horror? "Thea!" The word came out a worried whisper from behind me. I looked down to see my mother, the Lady Flamma, standing at the bottom of the stairs, brandishing a heavy iron skillet. It was probably the first time she had ever picked up one of those. Guilt for being a little unkind bit at me. My mother's face was pinched with fear. She just wasn't used to this kind of thing. And yet, she still had gone off to find the biggest, heaviest thing she could use to help her daughter. Flapping at her with one free hand, I whispered as loud as I dared, "Go back. Father needs you to keep him safe." My mother frowned, and I was sure she was about to refuse. Amazingly, she turned and left, hurrying back to the drawing room where she had left her husband. "First time for everything," I muttered. But I felt strangely sad instead of pleased. It was odd not to have her fussing over me like I was still a little girl. Not that I wanted to have any further discussions on marriage, far from it. Besides, there probably weren't many nice noblemen left. That thought was still too sharp, even for me. I veered away from what that meant for the many noble suitors I might have once had. Even the Westerforth boys, Tomas and Tavo, spoiled as they were, didn't deserve to be eaten by a dragon. But was a dragon hiding here? Something snuffled and growled inside my old room. It was now or never. With a yell, I kicked aside the door and swept in, my short sword low. Something small, wiry, and fanged barked and snuffled. The furry white land pig growled, snapped, and got caught in the ruined bedsheet. A wave of relief crashed through me. It felt like years since I'd last seen her. "Dobbit, where have you been? Have you been up here this whole time?" I sheathed my sword and extricated her from the voluminous white sheets that had once been part of my bed. She excitedly licked my hand and tried to snuff at my face. "They thought you had run away." I scolded Dobbit, who looked a little like a cross between a small pug-nosed dog and a fluffy cushion. Her big rolling eyes regarded me with a love and undying admiration only a pet can give. I sat down, sighed, and allowed her to climb up onto my lap with snuffles, snouts, and sneezes. "There, girl." I patted her thick fur as I had done 1,000 times before in this very room. But it had looked quite a bit better than this. The wooden board windows to the balcony had been left or blown open, allowing the winds to ravage the small room. Smoke tainted the air, and even a few leaves littered the floor. A wardrobe had been overturned, spilling out a collection of sugary dresses and blue robes, jerkins of fine fawn, and a mass of shoes. They looked like they belonged to a different person and a very different time. My old writing desk had fallen over and had deep gashes on its surface, doubtless from Dobbit's scrabbling and not from a dragon. The wall hangings and blankets were spread around the room and pulled from the walls. Despite all the destruction, what struck me the most was how the room seemed like too much space for one person. I had changed so much. The months of cramped living at the Dragon Academy, sharing a room with Varla, had made me see the world differently. Small, finely embroidered cushions lay scattered over the floor. They'd been made by a great craftsman from the Gabon Heights. They were still nice to look at, but we had no need of pretty adornments now. They'd keep my father warm, at least. I gathered them up in a blanket that was still mildly clean. On a still-standing bedside cabinet, I saw my small dragon figurines bearing fangs or in noble stances. They had been carved by a master woodsman from the southern kingdom, and although they had certain elegance, it was clear the carver had never ridden a dragon. They were the sort of idealized images people created when they thought about dragons and dragon riders, but had no real experience of them. I picked one up, looking at its fierce snarl with one claw raised high. "Kalax doesn't look like that, does she, Dobbit?" I asked the land pig, who had closed her eyes and was waffling happily. A fierce dragon didn't bother to strike a pose before it struck. I was such a foolish girl, I told Dobbit, who agreed with a pleased whine. She started to make a husky, almost purring snore. I pocketed the small dragon, unsure why I was keeping it, but unable to set it back down, and urged Dobbit to follow me, stepping over a spilled pile of dresses, breeches, and other clothes that no longer held any interest to me. Growing up as the only daughter with two big brothers, one couldn't help but be a bit rough around the edges. My mother had often claimed I was breaking her heart every time she found me covered in dirt or torn after playing outside. She'd insisted I be able to dance, recite poetry, play a musical instrument, and practice the art of dressing well, but I did none of those well and would often skip those lessons in favor of martial training. I much preferred my Dragon Academy jerkin, tunic, breeches, and heavy riding boots to the ornate outfits I once wore. I cringed when I thought back to the girl I had been. I must have been so naive, so arrogant. What must Seb and the others have thought of me when they'd first met me? Another fearful whisper rose up from the stairs below. "Thea?" Sweeping Dobbit under one arm and clutching the cushions and blanket under the other, I stepped out to the landing. "It's just Dobbit, Mother." "Oh, by the first dragon!" Mother swore while shaking her head. "You gave me a fright. Come back to the drawing room. Your father has almost decided." "And I bet I know what he has decided," I muttered, trying to keep it under my breath, but to no use. Mother had always had very sharp hearing. Agathea, that is no way to talk about your father. I hung my head. She was right, of course. My father had been through enough without having a disobedient daughter as well. They had seen their home and the city of Torvald destroyed. King Durrance was dead, and now most of the land was in the hands of an enemy. The Darkening had returned. A good portion of the population was presumed dead, and others were still under the strange effects of the memory stone and had forgotten almost everything that had once mattered to them. If there was anything we could give thanks for, it was that Vincent, he wasn't a lord and he certainly wasn't my prince, had other things occupying his mind than individually controlling the ordinary citizens of Torvald. Most of those affected by the memory stone had been left where they stood to be taken away and looked after by friends, neighbors, and family. Vincent and the Darkening had other battles to fight. Now, I needed Father and Mother to come with me and join the refugees heading to King Justin's camp. Ryan, I knew, would have been saying the very same thing to them. "Come on, you'll catch a chill out here that will be the death of you." Mother's voice took on a stern tone. I headed down the stairs. Without the servants who had all fled during the battle, or any supplies, my mother had seemed mortified that we couldn't keep the house heated or even clear up the mess from the recent battle. I clambered past our small barricade of tables and chairs and slipped into the room. Believe me, Mother, the very last thing anyone should worry over is dying from a cold. If not for Seb holding back the wild dragons with his dragon affinity, the last hope for Torvald would have died out there in that lonely stretch of desert with none of the dragon riders the wiser as to what was going on. Amazingly, we had survived and regrouped near the mountains in a lonely broken gorge that not even Merrick could find on any chart. But we had all been affected by the memory stone. Some were now prone to periods of confusion and forgetfulness, but most could at least remember who they were fighting and why. King Justin was set on stopping Vincent and taking back Torvald. But with Vincent now in possession of the 3 dragon stones and his powers vastly amplified by the Darkening, he could command almost every wild dragon in existence as well as our own. But King Justin was grieving over the death of his father, and he was angry at how easily Vincent had managed to take control of so many so fast, and he wanted to fight. At least some of his advisors had convinced him we wouldn't be able to do it without help, and he had agreed to send soldiers and dragon riders to try to recruit any and all willing to fight. Here in Torvald, many of the residents remained in hiding in their homes, some waiting and watching the skies for rescue, while others had chosen to defend themselves from the invaders that still roamed the streets. King Justin wanted to let them know that there was a new king and that he was prepared to do what was necessary to save all those in the Middle Kingdom, but he needed their help. We'd chosen the drawing room for our temporary residence because it was a defensible space. The windows faced an inner courtyard, and we'd drawn the long drapes over them, making the room dark and a little dingy. I dropped the blanket and pillows on the floor and faced my father. He stood by the huge fireplace with his back to the flames. I'd gotten my red gold hair from him. He wore his hair long so it brushed his shoulders, and as I walked in, he was smoothing his mustache. Like Mother, Father had aged years in just a few days. Lines marked his face around his eyes, but he was still a strong, tall man dressed in a fine jerkin of leather edged with gold threads and leather breeches and boots. Ryan, who looked very much like a younger version of Father without the mustache, was crouched down in front of the fire, feeding it one of the table legs. There would be no woodsman delivering wood. Ryan kept the flame low so it would not attract too much attention from any marauders in the city, but unless a dragon spotted the smoke from above, I thought we were safe enough. Concern for my family's safety had me thinking about Seb, who was over in Monger's Lane. He'd returned to Torvald with Ryan and me, but had split off to find his family and do what he could for those in the poorer areas. Straightening, Ryan shot me a worried look from behind our father's back. He was letting me know that making plans to get our parents out of Torvald and to safety wasn't going to be easy. Clearing his throat, Father gave me a nod and tucked one thumb into his wide leather belt.
Agathea, we've been discussing matters. King Justin is being hot-headed. His father would never have advised a counterattack, not with the city in ruins and uncounted numbers missing, dead or injured. I cannot condone his throwing the lives of our people away in this fashion. I will give his plans no support. No, the people must leave Torvald and go into hiding.
I glanced at Ryan, who winced and shook his head. Glancing back at my father, I told him, "You defy your king and speak treason?" My mother stamped her foot. "Agathea, we may not have many windows left to us or any servants left to the house, but I would like to think House Flamma can still carry on a civil discourse." My face burned, and I was back to feeling as if I was 10 again. "I'm sorry, Mother, Father." I nodded to where he was glowering at me. "I'm used to plain speaking in the academy, sir." I clasped my hands behind my back and hoped I wouldn't get myself into more trouble. Father turned and spread out his hands to the fire.
"But that is my point, daughter. If the Academy and the Dragon Riders could not keep us safe, it's folly to think civilians taking up arms will do any better."
I glanced at Ryan for help, but he had turned away as well and was staring at the pile of tables about to become kindling. I had to imagine he was tired of arguing with Father. I wasn't. Near me, Dobbit settled onto one of the pillows from my room. I wished I could do the same, but I needed Father to see sense. "But, Father, King Justin needs us, all of us." Frustration and anger made my voice higher than it should be. I took a breath and tried for a more reasonable tone. "Where would it be safe from the wild dragons under Vincent's control? What if he sends worse after us?" I didn't know what could be worse than those wild dragons, but I had vague memories of Vincent's dark figure at the palace. He had commanded the king and others with the memory stone. His powers would be even stronger now that he had the 3 dragon stones. Mother huffed a breath, but Father held up a hand and said, his tone reasonable,
"Do you think I have so little care for this city? What I am suggesting is that we leave with the other families. We can hide deep in the woods. Once everyone has had a chance to rest, to gather our strength and mourn our losses, then is the time to prepare for battle. But not now. Not now."
I couldn't believe I was hearing my father say these words. It was as if a different man had stolen his skin. My father, Lord Flamma, was head of the 2nd most important family in the kingdom. There were even sayings about us. Easier to steal an egg from a dragon than separate a Flamma from their mount. Always a Flamma, always a dragon rider. Our family was entwined with the cobblestones and masonry of the city, with the Dragon Academy and the royal family. Flammas have fought for generations to protect the city and serve Torvald. I can't believe you won't take up arms against the worst enemy we've ever encountered." He shook his head and smoothed his mustache.
"It breaks my heart, too, to think that we must abandon the city, the Flamma estates, all the lands we have held for generations."
I was speechless. Tears stung my eyes. Did he really think that was my concern?
"But you have to see I am right. Why throw our lives away for King Justin, who seeks one last desperate moment? He is barely older than you."
He glanced at Ryan, who stood with his arms folded and a dark frown pulling at his face. As the king's navigator, Ryan must hate that Father was forcing him to choose between his family and the king. And then it hit me. Did I have to choose too? A pounding on the front door echoed through the house. I reached for my sword and turned, hearing Ryan step forward as he uttered an oath. But Father waved a hand at us.
"Weapons down. It's code. 6 knocks, 1 for each letter of our family name. You should know that."
He stepped out of the drawing room and came back with his arm over Renault's shoulders. Grinning, Father said,
"I sent for Renault. Our family is complete once more."
Mother threw herself into Renault's arms. Commander Renault, I should say, for he was the aerial commander of the Dragon Riders. I didn't know if I should salute or offer him a sisterly embrace. He was harried and a little pale, but he still stood tall. He was also wearing his mustache as long as Father's, attempting to imitate him, I thought.
Mother.
He kissed her cheek and patted her shoulders. She let him go at last, and Renault scrubbed a hand through his hair. Mother glanced from him to Ryan to me and pressed one hand to her heart. All of my children here safe and under one roof. A roof that currently has several new holes from wild dragons, I muttered. Ryan and Renault embraced and thumped shoulders. After a moment, Renault came over to me and swept me up in a hug, lifting me off my feet. For a brief moment, I wished we were children again, playing at being dragon riders. I swallowed down the feelings threatening to overwhelm me as he set me back down on my feet.
Good to see you safe, Thea.
And you, Renault. How is the king? I asked. Renault frowned.
Well, Justin is still affected by having been under the control of the memory stone, I fear.
Renault glanced around for a place to sit. Other than the floor, there wasn't much of anything. He glanced at Father.
Some mornings he forgets he is to inspect the riders, and other times he forgets the plans he has made and the orders he has given. All he truly remembers is his desire for revenge.
And the darkening, I added. Now, Agathea, my mother warned. I glanced at her and saw the worry in her eyes. She must be fearful of yet another fight between us. We'd once bickered far too much over silly things, but that felt like a long time ago. Renault huffed.
There are more pressing concerns, such as the status of our troops and our city.
Ryan gave a sharp laugh.
Half the command, or what's left of it, is here in this room.
Renault pulled at his mustache, but Father spoke up.
And that is why we must approach this differently, why we must think differently. There are few leaders, but House Flamma still stands. The royal family has been compromised by accursed magic.
By the memory stone, one of the 3 dragon stones, I said. No one seemed to hear me. Father clapped a hand on Renault's shoulder.
We cannot rush into battle with an enemy who has left us weakened, both physically and mentally. That is why I am taking this family out of the city to regroup with some of the other nobles. We will come up with a better course of action, one that is clear-sighted. Father,
Ryan started. A sharp look from Father and a pleading one from Mother stopped his words. Putting his other hand on Ryan's shoulder, Father shook him.
Ryan, you must come with us. Our family will make the best stewards, the best leaders for those we can save.
Father, we can't abandon King Justin. The people need stability. They need one ruler, not the Flammas announcing themselves as stewards, I cried. Frowning, Renault stepped away from Father and came over to face me.
Thea, there is more at stake than serving the king, especially one who isn't thinking clearly. We can't join him in this vendetta. Too many lives have already been lost.
He glanced at Ryan.
And you, Ryan, as his navigator and second, you will be expected to command the squadrons in battle. But what squadrons do we have left? 1, 2, perhaps a third, but most of them were cadets only a short time ago. They have no real experience. Are you ready for that responsibility?
Flushing red, Ryan stepped back, putting distance between himself and our brother.
I'll have you know. No, Renault is right.
Father slashed the air with his hand.
The people need us. We have to look after each other now and show the world we are strong together. That is what the people need. We must lead them to safety.
Well said. Mother dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. At that moment, I saw the plan that must have been in the works for a very long time. Mother had been so happy when King Durrance had danced with me at the royal ball. She had wanted me to marry Prince Justin, which would have put a Flamma on the throne. And Father was so proud of all that Renault had achieved, he was second in charge of the army. I didn't think Father or Mother had wanted to scheme against the old king or against King Justin, but there was one thing they cared about above all else: House Flamma. Whatever they thought was best for the Flamma family, they would do, even if it amounted to treason. But what about me? I didn't know where I fit into this new plan. I thought of Seb, out in the city somewhere, maybe dodging wild men or raiders and even dragons. How could I stay with my family and leave Seb to uncertain fate? But how could I abandon my family? My family was important to me. I was proud to be a Flamma, but with the stakes this high, they were expecting me to abandon the dragon riders, to give up my dragon Kalax and Seb and my friends, everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. I can't go. I won't go. What you're suggesting is wrong. Yes, the people need us, and yes, they need us to be strong, but they need us to lead by example, and that means fighting and not running away. What you're suggesting is downright cowardly. No, not just cowardly, traitorous. The words fell out. My father frowned, Mother gave a gasp, and Renault stared at me, surprised that I would refuse. But Ryan stepped over to my side and slipped his hand into mine.
Neither can I. My place is at the side of my sister and with my king, even if I wasn't his navigator. And you, brother, you should be at the king's side and leading our forces instead of walking away.
I gave a nod. Ryan was right. We couldn't abandon our king, even though that was what my father, Renault, and Mother planned to do. Shame washed through me at what they were proposing. I wanted to run from the house, to find Seb and Kalax and take to the air. We needed to stop Vincent and the Darkening for good, before what little remained of the life we'd led before was torn apart.